So in episode 5 of The Ones Who Live, entitled Become, we find out what's to become of Rick and Michonne, what's to become of Jadis, what's to become of the world that we currently are in, the Walking Dead universe. And I kind of wish we could go back to episode 4. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, it's Quana back again with another review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. So today I got a chance to watch episode 5 of The Ones Who Live. This is the Rick and Michonne spinoff for The Walking Dead. And I'm going to give you my thoughts and a breakdown of tonight's episode. But if you haven't watched it, there will be spoilers. So you can bookmark this channel. You can bookmark this video and come back to it after you've watched. But if you don't mind spoilers, stick around. It's going to be quick and brief. I enjoyed this episode thoroughly, but episode 4 still is my favorite. I just think that the writing of that episode and that intense kind of character study that we got with Rick and Michonne last week was just spectacular. I suspect that they will be submitting it to the Emmys for nomination, and I will be very disheartened if it's not up on the nomination board come next season. But this one was still a very solid episode and what has been a very solid run for a Walking Dead show, period. I think it will go down as the most solid 5 or 6 episode runs of any episodes in The Walking Dead. And in this episode, we find out what happens after our couple finally gets on the same page. First and foremost, spoiler alert and shocker of the night was the return of Father Gabriel, Seth Gilliam, who returned in this episode as he's traveling through the woods and having several meetups with Jadis, aka Anne. I had completely forgotten about their little kind of romantic, thing that they had going on there, because I just remember that he completely got kidnapped by her and the scavengers and completely forgot all about that story arc. And I'm sure that anyone who fell off from the show after the death of Carl, after the death of Glenn and Abraham, probably were like me, like, when did that happen? Especially given those of you who only kind of remember in season 11 and know who he ended up with in the show that way. And so I felt like the timeline of that was a little bit confusing at times, but it still worked because he's someone who, because of his role in bringing her into the fold, got a chance to know Anne. And we're really dealing with the duality in this episode of Jadis, and her multiple iterations. Jadis as the leader of the scavengers, who was a bit crazy, willing to do whatever was necessary to survive. Jadis, who is now trying to be the warrant officer of the CRM, who believes in their cause wholeheartedly. And Anne, who was an artist, who was someone who loved and could be loved, and someone who had found a sort of redemption with the people of Alexandria. And it was nice to see him come back and remind her of that. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's Father Gabriel. I was so excited. But most importantly, of course, we have the continuation of Rick and Michonne as they are traveling back toward Alexandria on this little honeymoon excursion. And I love the fact that as we see them, it's literally like they are on a trip. We see them stopping for souvenirs. I love when they stop by the license and Michonne is talking about how she never really liked those. And I'm like, same girl, because I've never seen my name on one of those nameplates either. Rick sees a little cheap, it's not real gold, but a little cheap necklace that has the name Michelle, breaks it off to just the letter M and puts it in his pocket. He sees a little license plate that says Junior, wants to get it for RJ. And she's like, nobody has ever called that boy Junior. I hope we get to see that again. I hope that's a callback later on in one of the other iterations, because we all know that what they're basically saying is The Walking Dead is not dead all the way. So it'd be great to get to hear Rick look at RJ and say Junior. That would be so amazing. And then Michonne finds a little axe and says, this is something that you could get for him. And he's like, is he ready for that? And she's like, Judith has a sword. She's me. He's you. I love that. I love the fact that, like, Judith is Michonne's child. You can't tell that woman that that is not her baby, okay? From the moment that she brought that formula back and first met the crew, that was her child, okay? And so she's like, that's my baby. That's my little girl. She's just like me. He's just like you. And I love that. And then they find a place to stay. But before that happens, they get interrupted by some people who are in the woods at this national park, and they need help. And they get help from Rick and Michonne. Why would you look a gift horse in the mouth? They do, and draw guns on them. Wrong people. And luckily, Rick and Michonne are humanitarians and do not kill them. But they do take back the peace offering that they had offered them, which were some noodles that they found along the way. I love the idea that, you know, ramen noodles are going to be one of the only things to survive in the apocalypse. And that sounds about right. Ramen noodles and what are those things called? Twinkies. Ho-hos and Twinkies. I love the idea that ramen and ho-hos and Twinkies are probably the only thing that are going to survive in the zombie apocalypse. That about jives. So finally they make it to this cabin, and they have a very romantic evening with a little bit of liquor and libation and the toothpaste that Rick managed to get from Michonne back at the souvenir shop. I love how that is a callback to the episode where they first kind of officially get together, and she tells him that she wants him to go get some toothpaste for her while he's out scavenging. That just made me just so many little warm callbacks to them, but also to Carl, because Carl is the reason for them getting together. Michonne was Carl's best friend, and he falls in love with her all the more because of the way that she loves his kids. And I love that. I love that callback. That was so sweet. The fan edits on Twitter for this show are hilarious. Like the way that Andy becomes Rick, and Rick cannot keep his hand or eyes off of Michonne at any time. It is the ultimate rom-com. Like, this is the rom-com that I want to see all the time. That's kind of why I say I kind of wish that this series had ended with episode 4, because at this point I have suspicions about what's to come, and I don't want that. I want it to end with them, Thelma and Louise style, driving off into the sunset, going home to reunite with their family. And just the idea that perhaps maybe in one of these spin-offs with Daryl or Carol or Negan and Maggie, that we'll just hear that, you know, Rick and Michonne returned and reunited with the kids. If they decide to not make any more with Denai and Andy, I just want to know that Rick and Michonne survive and get to carry the legacy. I don't want to know what's going to happen. But I digress. They are woken up the next day with Jadis and a gun in their face, and she has caught up with them. And they basically kind of left a trail for her to look for and find them. And she, of course, threatens to kill them. And it becomes this cat and mouse chase. Now, as we're going through all this, we're still getting these inner cuts of her with Father Gabriel, trying to kind of like appeal to her sense of humanity. You know, the people in Alexandria, they cared for you. They brought you in. Why aren't you willing to share resources? Kind of reminding her that you're with this group now, and you say that they are going to save humanity, and yet there are people out here who need help and they're not helping them. How is that saving humanity? And is that a humanity worth saving? That's something that I think has to be in the forefront of our minds, because Jadis wholeheartedly still believes that the CRM can do good and is going to do good in the world. And for the rest of the world, it's like the difference between like morality and ethics and what's right versus like saving the few and saving all that you can. And the Alexandrians have always been about saving people who need help. No matter what, you're not going to hurt people. The most that they strayed away from that was probably with the survivors and Negan, when they went into those survivor camps and they killed those people at nighttime. That was the time that they strayed from that cause, and we saw the outcome of that, because at the end of the day, Negan was wrong because he killed Bay, he killed Steven, but he wasn't wrong because they did kill a whole lot of their people in the middle of the night. And this reminds us that that's not who Rick and Michonne are. They're not people who kill unless they're attacked. And they have to be about the business of saving people. Blase, cat and mouse. Eventually, Jadis is wounded. She runs up on the survivors that they rescued and attempts to get them to help her. They end up getting 86'd by some walkers, and she gets injured, and it all comes out at the end with her being injured, her being bit, and her facing her death caves into the part of her that's still in and tells them where the dossier on Alexandria is. But before she goes, she does ask them not to hurt the people of the CRM, not to take the CRM down, because in her mind, she still believes in their cause. And Michonne says, no, we're not going to do that. We are going to take them down. They don't deserve to keep doing. We're going to make sure we find out what they're up to, and we're going to give that to the people, and the people are going to be the ones taking them down. Now, I hope that that is the plan, like give it to the people, let the people decide what they want. But ultimately, like, I really just wish that the plan was to sneak in, get the dossier, and then hightail it back to Alexandria. Because in my heart of hearts, I don't think that this is going to go well. I don't think that this is a good plan. I think that you get back to your kids. Like, at the end of the day, their daddy's been gone for like 9 years. Let's get him back home and safe, and we can do with the CRM later when we have some manpower. So we only have one episode left. At the end of the episode is probably the biggest like moment of the episode, because during the talks with Gabriel and Jadis, he talks about Rick, and he talks about Rick wanting to marry Michonne and finding this ring on the outside on the ground, and wanting Father Gabriel to marry them on the bridge, if the bridge had been built, the bridge that was going to unite the communities, if it had been built, and how that was going to symbolize like their new life together, and never getting a chance to do that. He gives the ring to Jadis, and Jadis ends up giving that ring to Rick at the end, and Rick proposes to her. What he says to her in that final moment is so absolutely beautiful. He looks at her and he says, "It's a broken world, Michonne, and you're the only thing that puts it back together. It's a broken world, Michonne, and you're the only thing that puts it back together." I suspect that is a little bit of heavy-handed foreshadowing that she's going to get out. She's going to go back and have to tell Judas and RJ that she did find the brave man, and the brave man did a great thing for them. He sacrificed himself for them. Because that between that and also what she says in the barn to Jadis about sacrifice, like, I suspect that is where this show is. I don't think that both of them are going to make it home. Because if that were the case, as Scott said at the end of episode 4, in the after show, he talked about we could have ended the show right here on episode 4. And you wouldn't show all of this because you have the CRM still kind of lingering in the background of the Negan and Maggie storylines, in the Daryl and Carol storylines. So why would you end it all here if Michonne and Rick are able to actually end it? It doesn't make sense. It seems to me that maybe they're not going to be successful. Michonne is going to get back to Judith and RJ, but Rick won't be with her. That is my prediction. Now, that being said, this is a prediction that I hope I am 100% wrong about. I don't want to be right on this prediction. I want both of them to make it home. What would be worse would be if Michonne died and Rick lived. But I don't think Andy or Denai, I think they are both too thoughtful about what that imagery would mean for the universe to have her die and him be the survivor. I don't think that's the case. But the idea that we're in a world where maybe Rick doesn't get to meet RJ, maybe he doesn't get to reunite with Judith, is not a world I want to exist in. So I really, really hope that perhaps there's just some cliffhanger where we don't know. The other prediction that I do have for the show is there have been these wonderful callbacks to Carl all along the way, which I really love, because Andy and I were really, really hurt by Carl's character being killed off. They were really hurt by that. There's a whole backstory to Chandler Riggs leaving The Walking Dead, which he was told that he was going to be continuing in the show. He moved to Georgia, was going to go to school in Georgia, was going to make plans to progress his life there so he could still be a part of the show, and then he was written off the show. Now, there's a lot of suspicions around the fact that he was written off of the show because he was going to be turning 18, and that was going to mean renegotiation of contract and more money. And why not just give Chandler Riggs more money? I don't know. It makes zero sense. He was the life pulse of The Walking Dead. And I think that's a mistake that Scott Gimple now realizes was probably one of the biggest mistakes of the show. And one of the reasons why, although they didn't completely get rid of him from the network, why he kind of took a back seat and like more of a hands-off approach with The Walking Dead in the main storyline, and it went over to Angela Kang, because that was such a monumental disappointment. I mean, people were upset about Glenn, but that was in the comic. Carl is still alive and kicking it in the comic. He's last man standing. So that was a big thing, and probably something that he regrets. I suspect that with Michonne giving him the phone and kind of healing him, that maybe the show is going to end. We've had all these wonderful dream sequences with Rick before, and I was forgetting that we had those with him in other renditions, where we had the table, the dinner scene after it was revealed that Glenn and Abraham were killed, the ones killed, that there was this wonderful dinner scene with them, and Sasha being pregnant with Abraham's kid, and Glenn and Maggie and their little boy, and that was possibly all just Rick dreaming. I think that we're going to get a reunion with Rick and Carl before the end of the show, and that is going to be probably the only thing that is going to save what is possibly going to be a very sad ending to this show. I hope I'm wrong. Let me know down in the comments what your predictions are for The Ones Who Live, because we only have one episode left before all of our questions are answered, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Toodles!